Well, let me just start by going through the definition of awakening because it relates to the absolute. And first, let me talk a little bit about the absolute in really brief terms. I use the term the absolute. It's a common term used in Mahayana Buddhism and the Zen tradition. And the reason the term the absolute is used is that it refers to the source as absolute truth and absolute reality. And when we say absolute, another way of saying that is unconditioned. Anything that's conditioned has a birth, a process of decay, and a death. So that's all the conditioned world. The unconditioned is not subject to birth, decay, and death. It's always in existence. It always has been in existence. It always will be in existence. So that's why we call it unconditioned or absolute. And that's the source of all life. There's the way that I position it based on experiences that there's two functionings of the absolute. There's the unmanifest, which is characterized principally by absence, by an emptiness, a nothingness. And yet when we experience it, it isn't nothing. It isn't it isn't a lack. There's a fullness to it. There's a something to it. I liken this sometimes to if you go to your bookshelf and remove a book, the space that book occupies, if you look in to that space once your hand is holding the book, you see there's an emptiness, an absence there, and yet there's an energetic sense. Something belongs here, something is here. And that's the experience of absence. It has that felt sense. The unmanifest is characterized by blackness, a rich, dark, luminous blackness. And the chief qualities we come in contact with there are peace and stillness. And when I say peace, it's not a peace that's a conceptual peace, meaning it's not in relation or in opposition to anything. It's peace that stands alone. It's primordial peace. And the other quality is stillness. And this is a stillness that isn't just an absence of noise. It's a stillness that's present even when there is noise. So it's a deep stillness, a perfect stillness that we encounter and make contact with, or we can when we make contact with the absolute. And the unmanifest I've just been describing, that's the power of the absolute. That's the life force that gives life to all conditioned beings. The other functioning of the absolute I call the manifest, and that's characterized by brightness, by a brilliant white light, a brilliant white cloud, I call it sometimes. And the chief characteristic there is presence. So a here-ness, an immediacy, a solidity, along with pure love. This is an unconditioned love that loves everything equally and fully. It's not subject to any conditions, meaning if I did something bad today, it's not going to judge me and withhold love. It's not a conditioned love. It's not a human love. It's an unconditioned love, a universal unconditioned love. So we always have access to that. And so the love and the presence is really the driving force of the functioning quality or function of the absolute. And combined with the unmanifest, which has the power of silence and stillness and peace, that's what animates the pure love, pure presence. And then the other quality in the absolute is pure awareness. And that's awareness without concept. So it's direct awareness. We don't know it based on relating it to something else. You often hear this with people who try new meats. They'll use the expression, oh, this tastes like chicken. Well, that's an example of a conceptual um, relationship where you're comparing it and saying it's like this. When you are in direct awareness, if you had that piece of meat in your hand, you would only know what it is based on its feel, its smell, its taste. You wouldn't have the concepts, you wouldn't have the ideas about it. So it's based on direct experience, direct knowing. So that's the territory, very briefly, of the absolute. And then the absolute comes into conditioned form. It comes into manifesting as we are. And part of the reason that there is form, there is conditioned living, is because the absolute can only awaken to itself in form. It needs humans to wake up so the absolute can awaken to itself. And the felt experience in awakening is that is that all of conditioned reality is touched by that awakening. So the awakening affects, as Jung called it, the collective consciousness. We feel the collective take a breath, take a step up when there's an awakening experience in one consciousness. All consciousnesses are impacted positively by that. So, returning then to an awakening experience, there are three components for me to confirm an awakening experience in someone. There needs to be a deep experience of absence of self. Another way of languaging this in Buddhism is no self, or absence of self, not self. And the felt sense of this, normally, if I were to say to you, who are you? You would turn in self-reference in some fashion. I'm this body, I'm this age, I'm this gender, I live in this country, I went to this school, I do this kind of work, I have this kind of a family, things like this. And those are the markers of me, I would say. And when we're in absence of self, none of those are available. We tune in and turn to touch these different aspects of what we call self, and they're not there. It's not that we don't have a body, it's that we're not identifying with it as identity. So we can feel the body, but it's not a me, it's just a body. There's a history that goes with this body and mind, but it's not my history, it's just history. So that sense of self, that connection to this is mine, is absent. The first times that we experience absence of self, we normally will move very quickly back into self because it will feel destabilizing, unsettling to not know exactly who we are. And with repeated experience of absence of self, we can stay longer and longer without making that movement, without flexing the muscle of the self to assert who we are to ourselves and others. I can stay a question mark to me. The second component is when we recognize, when the absolute recognizes itself in this consciousness, in this location, it's not only the recognition, there's also the knowing that's who I really am. That's my true identity. So rather than the self being the true identity, we understand that the absolute is true identity. And then the third component is a thoroughgoing unity or love experience. And this really puts us in touch with the non-duality, the non-separation, that everything is one. Everything is a fabric of oneness, and the oneness is love. And it's a love that's undivided and a love that's unqualified. And by that, I mean, it doesn't matter what history you have. It doesn't matter how you even look at yourself, how you take yourself. None of that matters. The love is complete. It's unconditioned, universal love. And we're included in that. We are loved completely, exactly as we are. We don't need to do anything to get this love, nor can we do anything to lose it or have it be withdrawn. It's not conditioned. So this is really a tremendous experience, as you can see. One of the great Zen masters, Dogen, from Japan, had a wonderful expression for awakening. He said, dropping of mind and body. So dropping mind is pointing to a sense of me, a history, all the markers of me that I mentioned and didn't mention. And then the falling away of body is the recognition of this body is me. So we don't have the body or the mind to reference in that moment of awakening. That's part of the absence of self-quality. So it's a lovely way to say it, the dropping of mind and body. In the Zen tradition, we will sometimes talk about depth of awakening. And the depth of awakening really relates to how long the sense of self, the familiar sense of self, is suspended. When people have awakening experiences, they can be of varying durations. I've had students have literally 1 minute experiences up to experiences that last months. And it's just a matter of how open we are. There's a lot of variables that are more intricate than I can communicate that go into it. But we can have different levels, depths of awakening based on how long the sense of self is suspended. Eventually, the sense of personality reasserts itself. It doesn't reassert itself in the same manner. It normally asserts itself in a manner that this is like gravity. It's an unchallengeable truth. After Kensho, which is first awakening terminology in the Zen tradition, one knows that the sense of self is not permanent because it was suspended. That means it's conditioned. So we don't have the same allegiance to it. In the Theravadan tradition, in the first stage of awakening, one of the chief qualities or impacts of that first awakening is a dropping of I forget the exact languaging, but it's the self view. Personality view is dropped. Now notice it doesn't say personality drops. Personality is suspended for a period of time, but the view is what gets broken. And by view, we're meaning absolute view. This is the way the world looks out of these eyes. This is ultimate reality, period. And when that gets suspended, we realize it isn't true. This sense of self can be here and it cannot be here. So it isn't permanent. That's really what we get. And the absolute is.